Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our Tuesday Treasure program, where we go through some of the lesser-seen objects in the museum's collection. My name is Amy.
I'm Tate. And I'm Alex.
And we are seniors at Staples and Wilton High School, currently interning at the Westport Museum for History and Culture.
At the museum, we are pleased to offer our free programming. We do suggest a donation of $5 for all of our programs, but we understand that this is a difficult time. Any support you can offer the museum, however you are able to during this time, is greatly appreciated.
If you have any questions, please feel free to enter them in the comments below, and our chat moderator will answer appropriate comments and questions. In this Tuesday Treasure episode, we'll be looking at negative and positive glass plates of Westport from around the 1880s to 1900s. Before we show each of our 7 individual plates, we'd like to give some general history about this era of photography.
A negative refers to the image created when light is focused through a photographic lens and comes in contact with light-sensitive material. The chemicals collodion and silver nitrate are used to make a plate photosensitive. An image is negative when the colors are opposite of what our eyes see, in terms of light and dark. When light is exposed through the negative onto light-sensitive paper, the resulting image will be positive, meaning the colors are correct. Why use glass instead of paper? Glass allows for a sharper, more detailed image in stable negative, and with glass, several prints could be produced from one negative. In the mid-19th century, photographers had to use wet plates, which were invented by Frederick Scott Archer in 1851, whereby the photographer had to coat the glass plate in a light-sensitive chemical called collodion, expose the plate, take the picture, and develop it in a darkroom, all within a very short period. Collodion, by definition, is a syrupy solution of nitrocellulose and a mixture of alcohol and ether used for coating things, chiefly in surgery and in other photographic processes. The photographer would begin their process by coating a glass plate with collodion, then they would place it in a bath of silver nitrate. This resulted in a reaction that turned the collodion into photosensitive silver iodine. A negative refers to the image created when light is focused through a photographic lens and comes in contact with light-sensitive material. The chemicals collodion and silver nitrate are used to make a plate photosensitive. The wet plate was put into a light impenetrable case with a retractable shutter, and the case went into the camera behind the focus lens. The lens cap would be removed, and the photographer would count the seconds for exposure. After the exposure, ranging from 5 to 20 seconds, depending on how lit the room was, the photographer had roughly 5 minutes until the plate dried. Exposure and processing had to occur before the plate dried because once collodion dries, it becomes waterproof, and during the developing process, the reagent solutions used for development can't penetrate it. The photo was developed by pouring a solution of pyrogallic acid over the plate within a darkroom. Photographers either had to stay close to their darkrooms or find a way to create essentially a portable darkroom, both of which were very inconvenient.
Dry plates were invented in 1871, but weren't made available to the public until 1873. They had a considerably less restrictive time constraint than its counterpart, allowing for greater stability and mobility. Dry plates were invented by Dr. Richard L. Maddox in 1871. Thanks to the dry plate, the wet plate was largely out of use by the end of the 1880s. Photographers could prepare their negative plates ahead of time, expose their plates, store them safely, and process them later. They also required less exposure to light than wet plates. Dry plates were coated with a gelatin emulsion of silver bromide, and they were typically done on thinner glass than wet plates, which also made them more fragile. However, they were incredibly economically successful due to their convenience. The technique of dry plate photography would remain prominent all the way up until the 1920s, and allowed photography to expand into more of a hobby for those who could afford it, as the cost of the process was relatively lower than previous iterations. Dry plates eventually became obsolete with the development of film rolls using gelatin silver paper in 1887 and Kodak's Brownie box camera. Film roll was far more stable and lightweight than glass plates, and rolls could be mailed for development, making them far more convenient. And here are some fun facts about glass plates. In some glass plate negatives, the photographer's thumb is visible on the edge of the plate. This is because of them holding the plate while coating it in the collodion solution. Throughout its use, glass plate photography was used to show many aspects of the world, from war to royalty. Queen Victoria was photographed on a glass plate, as well as Matthew Brady, one of the first ever American photographers, and who photographed major events like the Civil War.
Unfortunately, a drawback of the use of glass plate negatives is that their condition can worsen quite quickly in several ways. The first is obvious, the glass breaking. The second is that the emulsion layer, which is the actual image, can begin to degrade. And finally, from water damage. Dry and wet plates do have some different storage requirements, but are all around similar to preserve. To best store glass plate negatives, it is suggested that they are kept in a room with a temperature less than 65 degrees Fahrenheit, with a humidity around 30%. This slows the rate of degradation caused by chemical reactions. Most plates are very small, either 2x3, 4x5, or 5x7. The glass itself can deteriorate due to moisture. Negatives should be stored in an individual paper enclosure. Envelopes that don't use adhesives are very much advised, since adhesives can react quite badly with the negative's chemicals. Plates that are broken need to be handled with extra care, since they are prone to flaking. Many negatives were lost over time due to plate recycling, which was during the 19th century when men would buy old glass plates, scrape off the emulsion, and then resell the plate. When handling, wearing gloves, specifically non-vinyl plastic gloves, is advised. You can see that the glass plates from our collection all have a frame that says bestseller and a New York address. The seller company sold the equipment that takes the photo and holds the glass plate, so they did not necessarily do the developing.
Our first plate shows 3 large ships at Compo Beach with their sails up, anchored and unmoving, with 6 rowboats in the foreground, and the men in the rowboats wearing colonial hats. The ships were at Compo Beach for a reenactment of the Danbury Raid that occurred on April 25, 1777, when 26 British ships anchored off the mouth of the Saugatuck River and landed 2,000 men at Cedar Point, which today is Compo Beach. The British came to destroy Continental Army materials and foodstuffs. We suspect that this photo of the reenactment was taken in 1877 because it was the centennial anniversary of the Danbury Raid.
This photograph shows how intense the Great Blizzard of 1888 was. You can see a large pile of snow takes up the foreground and a row of 3 houses in the background, with a group of 4 people bundled up behind the snow. The house with the porch is the old Westport Hotel that was bought by E.T. Bedford and converted into the YMCA in the 1920s. As you can see, there is a massive deposit of snow in front of it. The Great Blizzard of 1888 devastated the Northeast, especially New York. The snow was eventually cleared away by horse teams. This is the worst blizzard to hit Westport, and an important historical moment to look back on, as we can see the hardships people faced when they did not have the technology we do today to overcome such extreme weather. It took 8 days for railroads to be cleared off, and people were stuck in their homes for over a week.
The third glass plate we have shows another blizzard, this one the one in 1934. It shows a street view of Main Street, and it looks like there are 7 men standing near the street looking at the photographer. To the left, there are 3 big houses with a bank of snow. The right has a large bank of snow as well. The view of the street is very similar to the view of the 1888 blizzard. This is a negative of yet another brutal storm to hit Westport. With the ability to see this negative and trace them back to a definitive year, we are able to compare the 19th century New England weather patterns to present day. It's clear that the 1888 blizzard had a brief but extreme impact on the people in Westport.
This fourth plate that we have is a bit of a mystery. It shows cannons lined along the Saugatuck shore with large mast boats in the water in the background. In the foreground, there are tents and men wearing Civil War era uniforms. There are barrels, likely munitions, also lining the shoreline. The building in the background may suggest that this photo is from the 1880s. However, the details in the image itself may suggest that this is from the 1860s during the Civil War.
This glass plate shows 4 men standing in a street clearing up tree wreckage, taken between 1900 and 1920. One has an axe and long gloves. There are long wires which have been torn off by the telephone poles from the falling trees, stretching overhead in the picture. All of the men are wearing flat caps. This picture was taken on Canal Street. It took 2 weeks to clear the wreckage of all the fallen trees. We can see how people used to clean up after massive storms before we had the machinery and technology to help. We can also see one of the men having to use an axe to chop the trees in order to move them out of the way. You can imagine that this form of removal was extremely tedious, but was really the only way it could get done at the time.
This next glass plate shows 3 bathers on a boat taken from about 1900 to 1920. These 3 men were around the ages of 20 to 30, and they're shown sitting on a boat on the shore, staring at the camera. The face of the man on the left is slightly blurry, and the face of the man on the right is very blurry. This is because they were probably moving while the photo was being taken. They are also wearing short-sleeved shirts with stripes on them. The man on the left has stripes along the hem, and the man on the right has horizontal stripes. The man in the middle is wearing a tank top. This glass plate shows us what bathing suits used to look like. Before polyester, nylon, and spandex were used in bathing suits, they used to be made out of wool and canvas, which were very heavy when wet, but they weren't transparent. Bathing clothes were also very modest, which is very different from today. Leisure time at the beach has been an American staple for over 100 years.
Our last bestseller plate shows one large tree with a large hole that stands on the side of an intersection of 2 roads. The tree looks very old, almost close to dying. It is standing right next to an old stone wall. According to local legend, many Native American treaties were signed at the bottom of this tree. This elm tree is more than 300 years old. It stood at the corner of now Turkey Hill and Longlots Road. Although the dating of this tree is unknown, it is important to recognize the history of the indigenous people, primarily the Pagusset tribal people, who lived here before Europeans colonized Westport. This tree was a place where many treaties may have been signed, and thus is a place of great importance to the indigenous peoples who lived here.
All of the glass plates that have been shown so far have been positive images. Positive means that the colors are not inverted. Now we would like to show you what a negative glass plate actually looks like. As you can see, the colors are much different than the previous 7 plates. When an image is originally taken by the photographer, a negative is created, like the one shown here. The negative is then processed to create a true-to-life depiction of the image. From this positive, a photograph is then developed. Pictured here is the Seaver family enjoying tea at their dining room table.
Thank you all so much for joining us. We hope you learned a little something new about glass plate photography. Tune in next month for golf, where we'll go through some of the club and ball sport objects in the museum's collection.
Thank you.